Hi everyone, Elle Hackney here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, where I like to speak to everyone in the book world, whether they be authors, illustrators, podcasters, or industry professionals. And today I have a Brisbane author who is not a #1 New York Times bestselling author. Please welcome Troy Henderson.
Thank you for having me, Lauren. I'm very excited to be talking with you today.
I really like how that is the opening line to your website.
Yeah, well, that's because I saw these, when I was looking at different author websites, that all of them were saying like New York Times #1 bestseller, and yeah, that was just something I did, and maybe one day that would be nice, but for now that will do for now.
Now I'm fascinated by your book, Head Grenade. Please tell me all about it and how you came up with this brilliant storyline.
Thank you. Oh, I really appreciate that. One thing was I knew I wanted to set a book in Brisbane. That was one of the main elements of it because, I left Brisbane to go live in London for a couple of years and like ran a pub and was playing music and stuff over there. And then when I came back to Brisbane, I sort of just had this new appreciation of it and got to see things a bit differently and really appreciate it. So I knew I wanted to do a book about Brisbane. Another element of it is, the hospital setting and everything. I actually just randomly ended up working as an orderly in a hospital for a couple of years because, my auntie worked there and they said they needed orderlies. And so I did that. And it was just fascinating because, I saw my first dead body. I saw people in the IC units. I saw, kids being born, just all this amazing stuff that you'd never be exposed to. And I thought, geez, I've got to, put that into a story one day, just that setting, because I was pretty familiar with it. And I mean, it's just strange. Like you're getting $20 an hour or something. Then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, can you get this body and put it in a, body bag and take it down to the fridge and things like that. So that was one element. And look, the other thing was I knew part of it came because I was thinking about my first memory. I was talking with my parents one day about what was my first memory. And they reminded me of something that happened that when I was a baby, and they were driving to the Sunshine Coast and to see some friends, and all of a sudden my mum took off her seatbelt just to wind up the window for me or something, and the car tire burst and the car flipped over on it and ended up flipping a few times and then landing. But there was this sort of significant car accident, and my mum broke her back. She was fine, but and I was fine too. But oh, sorry, my internet connection said it was a little unstable. Yeah, but so that was a pretty significant event. So I thought I'd love to include something like that in there. And look, the final thing was just this, there's all those superhero movies out at the moment. There's so many of them, all the Marvel films, and I wanted to sort of do the reverse of that, like have this thing of someone who had something that was taken away and how would you deal with your life after that? So that was some of the elements that came together for that.
I find that fascinating that after a lifetime of layered memories, you've put it into a book where the character, though, am I allowed to, I guess, reveal what the character does with life and death? Like, because future readers may be listening to this. I find the being able to bring things back to life, how does that all fit in?
Well, that was, I don't know. I don't know where that came from. I just knew I wanted to have this, that it's sort of the juxtaposition position of the being in a hospital thing, like someone who should be able to heal people or help people out, but they can't, but they're in this hospital setting where people do get helped out a lot. And that was just something, that's just one of the daydream things that you think, oh, wouldn't that be cool if you could do that? Or, oh, another thing, one time, my mum's, one of her dogs, unfortunately in the rain, escaped and was hit by a car, and so I had to come and pick her up. And it's just one of those things where you wish you could do something, but you can't.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like any memories, all those things when you're a kid, or you have your goldfish dies, and all those little elements that sort of kids learn to help prep you for the bigger things that happen later in life and death. So yeah.
Yeah, the story of Manny is quite a intriguing one. Lots of different layers. It unravels in ways you wouldn't expect. How long did it take you to write it?
Well, it's one of those things where, the first book, I think for a lot of people could take a lifetime. But really, in 2019, at the start of 2019, I had probably 40,000 words of a manuscript. And it was just something I realized I'd end up talking about it. I'd end up just tinkering away now and then. But I thought, if I'm going to get this done, I have this goal that I want to get my book published, or really the first one is just to get it finished. So I said, okay, I'm going to write every day in the morning for an hour, get up an hour earlier before work, write for an hour, and consistently do it until I'm done. And so that took me until sort of late February, where I had this, at least a first draft. And I thought I was sort of done. I didn't realize how intensive all the editing process is and everything, and how slow the industry then works, because I got editors to help me. I did rewriting. I met with a few authors who knew what they were doing, because I had no, you work by yourself a lot. And so I met a couple of authors who were established, and they pointed me in a few right directions, like getting editors and submitting short story competition things to help with once you're submitting. And one was this Lauren Daniels, who helped me with editing. She suggested I submit to this Hawkeye Manuscript development program, or competition. And so I did that, and I got shortlisted in that one for 2021. But then I still had more work to do, so I kept working on it, and eventually I resubmitted to them, and it got accepted. But even once it's accepted, it takes a year. So it's a really really long process, and I'm very impatient. So that was hard for me. So I tried to learn how to deal with that, and just that's how it is. But in the meantime, I just kept working on other things. So I've still got a few other things in the works as well. But yeah, it's really hard to sort of say exactly how long it takes to write. And the first one, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I had no idea. I was just, you use all the things you've learned from reading books over the years and watching films and all that, and just putting it together. Yeah, look, I just didn't know what I was doing, right? So that's why I don't know if some authors come out fully formed where they decide what genre they want to write in or what they're doing, but that's why I put a bunch of different ideas I had together and was just hoping it would work. So it comes from me. I had no really preconceived notions on what it was going to turn out into. And that's why, the thing on the back of the book says, a genre bending thriller peppered with comedy, street philosophy, science fiction, and romance, and, even when I was with an editor, she said, oh, so you've written a speculative fiction book. And that was the first time I'd heard of that term. I had no idea what spec fic was, and I know a bit more now, but it really just encompasses a whole sort of range of themes, or can. And yeah, so it's hard to say how long things take to write. So, you might have this idea that you can write something in 3 months, but sometimes that might just be a draft, or, you might work for something over years and piece it together. And, the other thing was, I didn't realize how much I'd have to get rid of. I have these things called offcuts, a folder called offcuts, and one called orphan scenes. So I have to cut out whole big sections, and it's really hard. You know what that's like, right, Lauren? Like,
oh, I do. My folder's called offcuts as well.
Is it? Okay, cool. Okay, yeah. So that's, and I hope that you can use those things. Maybe I try not to feel bad about it, because you've spent all this time. At the time, you don't realize that you might not be using that. But I was speaking to someone the other day, an author who asked me. I was at a talk, and this lady asked me whether I use those things that I get rid of in other books. And I said, well, yeah, I like to think of it like a bread making family from Italy who's had like a mother yeast or something for 200 years or whatever it is. And they keep using the same yeast and putting it into other breads. That was one thing I thought of at the time, which I'm not sure if that's a good analogy. But, it's nice to think that you can repurpose some things, and they just didn't work in this particular, book.
Yeah, no, I completely resonate with that, because it's funny talking to you how organically you've put this book together. That's exactly how I've been putting my first adult novel together, is literally bits and pieces over a span of time. And yeah. I like what you say by a mixed bag genre, because when you are submitting, sometimes you kind of go, okay, yeah, there's romance in there, but you know what? There's a bit of action, bit of thriller. I like how you've got a book that says that. But Troy, if I can ask, because Head Grenade is amazing the way it is. It's so polished. The storyline just works so well. Did you ever go back and read your first draft?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. That's the kind of things that keep me going. It's really nice that people, read it and then say nice things about it, especially because it's quite scary to get it out there. Yeah, look, if I had some people, I have had a look at a few things, and it's very embarrassing. That's okay. But in saying that, the very first line, Ward 4A smells like death. It should. It's the terminal cancer ward. That first line was always there from the very first thing I wrote. And there's a few things that are, but yeah, it's just a lot of things are a bit clunkier, and you learn how to write and edit a bit better. But it's very embarrassing to look back. I should do that a bit more fully sometimes, because it's hard to remember all the different iterations that everything goes over. And yeah, I'm glad you're doing that. Yeah, if you just keep going with what you're doing and you smooth things out later, I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, because it is a bit daunting. Like you said, like commercial fiction, 80,000 words, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to look at that, type your first 2,000, and then go, oh, how am I going to do this? But yeah, like you said, it can take time. Now with Head Grenade, because when you mentioned superhero movies before, there's so many of them, and there's only a few different superhero movies. Have you thought about putting this into a screenplay?
I would love to do that, and it's more the connection. Have you tried writing a screenplay or anything before?
Oh, I have one completed. Yes.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, because you see, it's just that's great. It's just a very different style, and I actually my second novel, I started that as a screenplay and worked backwards, but this one I just haven't yet, because it also seems like it's a lot of effort, and I'm not sure. I almost need assistance from someone who knows what they're doing. Because it's what each page is approximately a minute or whatever, and to think about it like that, and what do you put in and what do you leave out, and do you need to add extra things in there? So I do have some sort of friends who are semi in the industry who could help me out with that, I hope. But I would love to. It would be great to see that at some stage. Or do you do it a movie or is it a series? It would be great if you could do it as a series, but yeah, I would like to. That was one of the things I wrote down. I started trying to write, like goals for my writing. So next year I just wrote, okay, Head Grenade gets picked up for streaming. So we'll see what happens.
This is the suit I'm wearing to the Oscars.
Yeah, that's right. So.
Well, anyone watching this interview today, if you are looking for an Australian superhero movie that's edgy, that's layered, I suggest you pick up Head Grenade and give it a go. Contract Troy Henderson, because I think it would just be such an action-packed, great Australian either film or series. Now, Troy, you've mentioned a second book. What's going on with that one?
Yeah. Well, I also, originally I had this idea of I just want to write a book. I think a lot of first-time authors have that thing. They want to do that. But then once, I finished it, and then it was away for editing. It might be with someone for months at a time, or you're doing submissions. And I thought, okay, what do I do? I was in the habit of writing all the time. I just went on working on the next thing. So I'd really worked actually two other stories before Head Grenade was published. I had two others that were in, second draft forms that I'd sort of worked through. And the second one's called River City, and it's based in Brisbane again, and it's sort of a dark humor crime thriller. So again, I don't know how you feel about that, about getting into genres, but I sort of like reading a lot of genres too. And I've been reading so much different stuff, like heaps of just things like just women's fiction, who I always thought, was specifically for women, but meeting some of the other authors from the publisher, I read their things and I really loved it. So yeah, I didn't want to be too tied down. Not that this is, genre bending. I like the idea of that, where you can have a few different things together, because I think you can make it work. So yeah.
I hope that there's a genre that's called Troy Henderson, because it sounds like I like how you're known almost for ticking a few boxes there. Tell me about River City.
Yeah, so I started it. That's the one that started as a screenplay, and it was actually with a friend who said he wanted to do a short film that was started with a guy being tortured in a warehouse in Brisbane. And so I did this, sort of wrote a treatment or whatever, and I wrote, a few pages, and then he said, oh, this is good. Why don't you turn this into try and turn it into a series? So I kept going back and expanding it out, and the whole idea was that this head of a local crime organization has gone missing and his son has to step up, but he's dealing with other, you know, warring factions. He's dealing with this police officer who's chasing him, who was the guy being tortured, who they didn't realize was a police officer at the time. And, you know, he's dealing with an incompetent brother and this new woman comes into his life. So again, it's things like I try and do it. There's always elements I realize of what I do that come out as me, you know, like there's some humorous stuff in there. There's some gritty things. There's some, I hope, funny and interesting dialogue. There's a little bit of love story stuff in there too. So again, it's that sort of melting pot, which I just really, I realize, you know, it's like if you and I get the same premise, whatever it is, whatever, well, it'll come through from us, you know, our style and everything. So, and I like that and realize that that's a benefit. I'm not really a plotter. Are you a plotter or a
No, I
pantser?
don't. I'm not a plotter. What I'm like you, where I have sort of different folders and I write like plot lines. I have a folder for plot lines, and then I'll start putting bits of what the story is going to be, and then I copy and paste as I go into the manuscript folder. But then I have my offcuts folder where I've from things from the manuscript where I've gone, that's not okay. Copy that, pop that in there. So I'm like you, like no one taught me to do this.
Yeah, we work in a very similar way, it sounds like. And, you know,
Yeah.
even at one stage, I'd printed it all out and I was reading it because I like the idea, you know, it's really helpful once you've had it all on the screen for ages to read it on a physical sort of medium. But I had that and I was physically like cutting out bits of paper and stapling them to other pages so then I could go back to rewrite things like that. Like really things a bit primitive. And I can only imagine what it was like having to type things on a typewriter where you just work from start to finish. That just seems like a nightmare. I guess you deal with it, but that's not for me.
Yeah, I'm grateful for technology when it comes like that. So you don't use like software like Plotter or anything either. You're like me where it's Word documents and folders.
Yeah, well, actually, at the moment, I'm using that Scrivener,
Yeah,
but that's, yeah, because it can, at least I can break it out. It's just like having Word, but it breaks it out into chapters. So I have a chapter and you can sort of select the chapters going down on the side. And
that's
then once,
probably easier.
yeah, but because I realized I was, you know, I was in a Word document and you're trying to find a section. So you're just scrolling up and down and to finding the things. And then you think of something you have to fix earlier. So you're doing that. So yeah, normally what I do is now for the initial writing process is have it there and have it in Scrivener so I can choose chapters at a time. Then I export that in, and then I have it as a Word doc. And then once it's in that form, then I just read through normally. So I don't know. No one really told me what to do. So I just sort of found my way. And I think whatever works for you is the best way to do it. So.
I think that's quite refreshing advice actually for anyone watching who's new or thinking about writing, because it shouldn't be taken away from anyone because it seems daunting, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be made to feel like it's achievable for anyone, because everyone's got great stories to tell. Now, this wasn't always your life. You weren't always a author. So since becoming well known in the industry and having a fantastic book out, have you inspired others around you to write?
You know what? That's a really good question. And I'm not sure if I have and no one's told me perhaps, but yeah. Yeah, I don't think I mean my wife does a little bit of writing. I mean, she works in different industries, but yeah, no, I'm sort of the only writer in my family really. So I'm not sure. I mean, I know my dad started writing. He wrote a lot of biographies. He wrote like a biography for himself and a bunch of other family members. Actually, he passed away last year, but that wasn't why he was doing that. But he was working on all those things and he was writing a lot. So yeah, but I don't know. That's a really good question though. Have you found that?
Yeah, I have actually, and I encourage everyone. um, but I get what it is, because you were mid-30s, right, when this all changed for you, correct?
Yeah, see, I always loved read. I was like a voracious reader ever since I was a kid, but I was also hugely into music. So as soon as I finished school, I was playing in bands and recording and doing and touring, and that's what I wanted to do, you know. And that's also why I went to London. You know, I went there to play music and do that in between working at bars and the other things Australians have to do there, and traveling and all that, you know. But yeah, and eventually it was just a few years, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I just finished in a sort of, the band broke up and I didn't want to start again, but it's a really hard life. You know, it can be really unhealthy too. Like lots of traveling, lots of driving, staying in bad accommodation, being in bars all the time, food's not great, all that sort of thing. It's expensive. Like it's all, I mean, that's low level, you know. Of course, once you're a huge band and you're getting roadies to carry all your stuff and that for sound checks and staying in nice hotels and flying everywhere, that's all right. But yeah, but I love doing that. But then I sort of finished that up and I thought, okay, what's the next thing I want to do? And I always still wanted to be in some kind of creative realm. And I realized, oh, I had been writing this book I've been writing Head Grenade without really knowing it, just by saving notes and doing things over years. And I realized, oh, I've got this, you know, these bunch of ideas that I can start putting together. And so that's what I wanted to do. And also I realized, you know, you can write until whenever, as you can be really old and you can keep writing, and it's, you know, all you need is yourself to keep doing that. So I figure this is something I can do for a few years. And it's a really long journey, and not to discourage anyone, it's also really rewarding. And I just started doing this thing for myself, and then all of a sudden it gets out to a few people, and that's amazing. It still kind of blows my mind that people have any interest at all, or that they're reading it, and then even liking it's even, you know, better. And that's the sort of stuff that keeps me going. And doing things like this, I sort of love doing this. It's fun doing like talks at libraries or whatever, or, you know, I was at the Brisbane Writers Festival in a panel the other weekend, and that felt really rewarding, and the sort of thing that keeps you going. You go, okay, this is good. I still feel like a bit of a, you know, there's imposter syndrome all the time. I have that. I don't know if you get that, but even before the book was out, I thought, oh, they're just going to tell me this is all a big joke and they're going to pull it and it's not actually happening. And, or people are going to find out you can't write at all and it's going to be, you know, you're going to be humiliated. Just things like that. And it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why your brain would do that to you instead of just being encouraging all the time. Mostly it is, but, you know.
No, I understand, because one of my girlfriends who's just started writing this year, her first words to me were, I don't know who would want to read my story though. And I said, I'm sure when you pick up everyone else's novels that you read, they have thought that too, but you're reading their story. So I think what you're saying is relatable, but I'm glad
Yeah.
you ignored it, and I'm glad you did it.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, people, you can't always write like a certain author, but that's that thing of no one can write like you. You know, like no one can put the words together and do exactly what you can do. So trying to and accepting that that's the best way for you to go. Just do what feels real to you and do it without expectations. I'm sure maybe that comes later, but don't write for other people or trying to capture trends. Just do what feels good to you, and then it has that sort of truth element and will be good because you'll be interested in it too. So other people will probably be interested.
Yeah. Now, you did mention that you enjoy attending talks, being on panels, and visiting libraries. So if anyone out there would like to contact you to have you speak at their writing event or their book event, or also just to inspire younger teenage writers, how do they get in contact with you, Troy?
Yeah. Well, they can through my website. So it's troyhendersonauthor.com, but the same thing for, you know, Instagram or whatever. If people message me on Instagram, Troy Henderson Author, that's fine. Or just search my name. But yeah, I love doing those things. And it's great to, you know, there's been a few incidents of younger kids, like young girls and boys in their teens reading this book. And that makes me feel really good as well, because sometimes I worry that, you know, um, reading is disappearing, and because, you know, it's so easy to watch shows and things on streaming or movies. It's just so easy. You know, reading just takes that little bit of extra effort that I think some people can't go to. But there's nothing like it as well. That's the other thing I think people are missing out if they're not reading books. And there's so many great books and authors out there. It's hard to, you know, to read them all. But yeah, I've enjoyed discovering more sort of Brisbane authors and Australian authors and things like that as well.
Yeah. No, Troy, I actually think your future is going to be very bright. I can't wait to see what happens for you next. I think you've got so much potential, and all your ideas are just so captivating that I believe that either they translate to screen or stay in the paper-based books. I think you're going to do really well. But thank you so much, Troy, for speaking with me today. So can you please leave the audience with any final words of advice or encouragement, please?
I think Oh, thank you for having me, Lauren. It's been awesome. So yeah, you're like very lovely. It's great to talk to you. It's good to see you again. I haven't seen you since last year, but yeah, and I'll be watching what you're doing too. I'm looking forward to reading your debut novel as well. So yeah, how
Fingers
exciting!
crossed.
the, the one thing the most important thing I realized is consistency of writing. You know, even if you're not doing a whole lot, doing it pretty regularly, if you can do that, and it might not be every day, but just having a bit, and then not putting too many expectations on yourself or feeling bad. So yeah, I don't write to word counts. I would just write to time. So I'd say an hour every day in the morning before work if I can. I don't always do that, but as much as possible, because you know an 80,000 word manuscript is a lot to take in. So just little bits at a time, and the consistency's been huge. And yeah, not it's I know it's difficult not to care what other people think, but I think writing something you're interested in is pretty huge. You know, I think people trying to write to a genre to catch a trend is not the best way to go. But yeah, consistency. I'm trying to think of other. I'm sure there's other advice out there, but yeah, you know, there's a lot of writing. I started getting a bit caught in trying to read too much other advice, author advice, and all these books and everything. And then I realized, oh no, I did all right the first time, mainly about that. So I go, what? You know, it's good. It's good to learn more though.
Did all right the first time. Hawkeye are happy, and that's the main thing. But thank you so much, Troy, and I hope we get to speak next time when your River City book is released.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to, anytime you want to have a chat, that'd be good. And hopefully I'll see you around in person at some stage. But yeah, thanks for having me, Lauren.
Thanks, Troy.
Have a good day.